Welcome to Marple Whispers, where silence screams with hidden crimes. I'm Sean, and together we'll peel back the velvet curtain of polite society to reveal the treachery beneath. Trust no one. Question everything. The killer is closer than you think. In the quaint English village of Elderford, 1952, a grand manor hides a deadly secret. Sir Reginald Harrington tumbles to his death down the sweeping staircase. Or was he pushed? Enter Miss Marple, the sharp-eyed spinster with a mind like a steel trap, spotting clues others miss. A scuffed banister, a thornless rose petal, a whiff of sedative in the air, as whispers of inheritance, forbidden love, and buried grudges swirl among suspects. The scheming nephew, the jealous gardener, the loyal butler. Miss Marple unravels a web of deception rooted in a long-forgotten betrayal from India. But who waited in the shadows, gripping the rail for that fatal nudge? Prepare for twists, red herrings, and a shocking confession in this cozy Agatha Christie-style mystery. The killer, waiting on the staircase. Chapter 1. The Fall at Harrington Manor. In the heart of the English countryside, where the gentle hills of Somerset rolled like the folds of a well-worn tweed jacket, lay the village of Elderford. It was the autumn of 1952, a time when the world beyond the hedgerows still whispered of ration books and the faint echo of wartime sirens. Though here in this pocket of tranquility, life unfolded with the predictability of a village clock. Elderford was a place of thatched cottages, huddled around a green where sheep grazed indifferently, and where the air held the perpetual scent of damp earth and blooming chrysanthemums. At its edge stood Harrington Manor, a stately Georgian edifice with columns that spoke of faded grandeur and windows that gazed out like watchful eyes upon the winding lane. It was to this manor that Miss Jane Marple repaired on that fateful October evening, her sensible brogues crunching softly on the gravel drive. Miss Marple, at 72 years of age, was a figure as familiar to Elderford as the ancient yew tree in the churchyard. Tall and spare, with a crown of silver hair coiled neatly beneath a felt hat, she moved with the unhurried grace of one who had long since learned that haste was the enemy of observation. Her eyes, a piercing blue behind half-moon spectacles, missed little. Indeed, they catalogued the world with the quiet precision of a librarian shelving tomes. She was unmarried, a spinster by choice, she would say with a wry smile, and her days were filled with knitting, tending her roses, and listening. Ah, listening. That was her secret art. Villages, she often remarked to her tabby cat Percival, are like teapots. They simmer quietly until the lid rattles, and then out comes the truth, steaming hot. The invitation to Harrington Manor had come from Lady Margaret Harrington, a woman whose elegance was as crisp as the starched collars she favoured. Lady Margaret, in her early 50s, with a figure still slender from years of riding to hounds, had organised a modest harvest gathering, a nod to the bountiful yields of the estate's orchards. Sir Reginald Harrington, her husband, presided over it all like a benevolent squire. A retired colonel from the Indian campaigns, he was a man of ruddy complexion and booming voice, his moustache waxed to points that quivered when he laughed. At 65, he retained the vigour of youth, though whispers in the village hinted at a growing reliance on the decanter. Miss Marple arrived precisely at 7:30, her contribution a jar of her famed damson jam, tied with a ribbon. The butler, Mr. Edmund Graves, a gaunt figure in his 50s, with the impassive face of one who had seen too much upstairs and down, relieved her of it at the door. "Evening, Miss Marple," he intoned, his voice as smooth as polished oak. "The others are in the drawing-room." The drawing-room was a haven of chintz and flickering firelight, where the guests had already assembled. There was Reverend Thomas Hale, the village vicar, a mild-mannered man in his 40s with a clerical collar that seemed perpetually askew, his fingers twitching as if longing for his pipe. Beside him sat Arthur Langley, Sir Reginald's nephew, a handsome rogue of 30 with slicked back hair and a city suit that ill-suited the countryside. Arthur's eyes, sharp and calculating, darted about like a fox in the henhouse. Young Elsie Turner, the housemaid of 19, hovered at the periphery, her apron crisp and her cheeks flushed from the kitchen's heat, offering trays of sherry with a shy curtsy. Sir Reginald clapped Miss Marple on the shoulder with a meaty hand. "Jane, my dear, come for the port, eh? Or is it Margaret's infernal bridge tournament you're after?" His laugh rattled the crystal decanters on the sideboard. Lady Margaret, resplendent in a pearl necklace that caught the lamplight, smiled thinly. "Reginald, do behave. Miss Marple, how kind of you to come. We've missed your company since the fete." The evening unfolded with the gentle rhythm of such affairs. Idle chatter about the harvest fair, the vicar's latest sermon on thrift, and Arthur's tales of London opportunities that sounded more like pipe dreams. Miss Marple, seated by the hearth with her knitting needles clicking softly, a scarf in heather wool for the church bazaar, listened more than she spoke. She noted how Arthur's glass was refilled thrice as often as the others, how Reverend Hale's eyes lingered on the silver tray with unspoken envy, and how Lady Margaret's fingers twisted her pearls when her husband boasted of the manor's untouched cellars. Elsie, darting in and out, spilled not a drop, though her gaze flicked nervously to the grandfather clock in the hall. As the clock chimed 9, Sir Reginald rose with a flourish. "Right then, a toast to the harvest, and then I'll show you that infernal new gramophone upstairs. Plays the latest from America, jazz no less." He led the way to the hall, his footsteps echoing on the marble floor. The grand oak staircase swept upward in a graceful curve, its banister gleaming under the chandelier's glow, flanked by a vase of crimson roses on the landing above. The party followed, laughter trailing like smoke. Miss Marple brought up the rear, her mind idly piecing together the evening's fragments. Arthur's evasive answers about his debts, the vicar's cough that masked a sigh. Then, without warning, a sharp cry pierced the air. Sir Reginald's own voice, cut short by a thud that reverberated like a fallen tree. They rushed to the hall. There, at the foot of the staircase, lay Sir Reginald, his body crumpled in an unnatural sprawl, limbs akimbo, his head at a perilous angle against the newel post. A trickle of blood marred the marble from a gash on his temple, and his eyes stared blankly at the ceiling frescoes. The sherry glass he had carried lay shattered beside him, its amber contents seeping into the rug. Lady Margaret emitted a keening wail and collapsed into Arthur's arms with a muffled sob. "Reginald!" "Oh God, no." Arthur, pale as milk, supported her, murmuring incoherently. Reverend Hale crossed himself, murmuring a prayer under his breath, while Elsie let out a sob and fled to the kitchen. Mr. Graves, ever composed, stepped forward to kneel beside the body. "Fetch the doctor, sir," he directed Arthur coolly, "and the constable. Though it looks a simple fall." Miss Marple remained at the staircase's base, her knitting tucked away, eyes scanning the scene with clinical detachment. The stairs were polished to a mirror sheen, no obvious slickness, no loose carpet. Yet there, on the banister midway up, a faint scuff mark marred the wood, as if gripped by a hesitant hand. And on the landing, amid the rose petals from the vase, disturbed perhaps by a passing foot, one petal lay crushed, its edges frayed unnaturally, without the thorn that should have pricked the culprit. "Slippery stairs and a nightcap," murmured the vicar, regaining his voice. "Poor Sir Reginald, always one for his port." But Miss Marple's gaze lingered on that scuff, then drifted to the shadows pooling at the staircase's turn. Someone had been there, waiting perhaps, in the dim light. An accident, or a deed as calculated as the ticking clock. The village would buzz with it come dawn, but for now, in the hush of tragedy, Miss Marple felt the familiar thrill. A puzzle worth unravelling, threads of human frailty begging to be followed. And she, ever the listener, had heard the first discordant note. Chapter 2. Whispers over tea. The morning following the tragedy at Harrington Manor dawned with a deceptive brightness. the sun filtering through the lace curtains of Elderford's cottages like a polite intruder, casting golden pools on flagstone floors. The village, ever resilient in the face of misfortune, stirred to life with the clatter of milk bottles on doorsteps and the distant lowing of cows from the meadows. Yet beneath this veneer of normalcy, a current of excitement pulsed, subdued, of course, for Elderford prided itself on decorum, but palpable nonetheless. Whispers flitted from garden gate to post office queue. Sir Reginald's fall, so sudden, so final. Was it the port, the stairs, or something more insidious, lurking in the manor's shadowed corners? Miss Jane Marple rose early, as was her habit, brewing a pot of Darjeeling in her cosy kitchen, while Percival the cat twined about her ankles. She donned a tweed skirt and cardigan, practical attire for a day of quiet inquiries, and set out for Mrs. Potts's tea-room on the village green. The tea-room, with its mismatched china and lace doilies, served as Elderford's unofficial parliament, where secrets were traded over scones and scandals dissected with surgical precision. Miss Marple, ever the strategist, knew that grief loosened tongues, and tea provided the perfect solvent. The bell above the door tinkled merrily as she entered, a sound at odds with the sombre faces within. Mrs. Potts, a plump widow in her 60s, with flour-dusted aprons and a knack for remembering every villager's preferred brew, bustled over with a tray. "Miss Marple! Dreadful news about Sir Reginald. Sit, sit, I'll fetch your usual. The whole village is agog. They say he tumbled headlong, poor soul." Miss Marple settled at her favoured table by the bow window, affording a view of the green where children played hoops, and the church clock ticked inexorably. Indeed, Mrs. Potts. A shocking end for such a vital man. One wonders if the stairs were at fault, or perhaps something else. Her voice, mild as milk, carried a subtle probe, inviting confidences. Mrs. Potts set down the teapot with a clink, her eyes widening. Something else? Oh, Miss Marple, you do have a way of seeing through fog. Well, between you and me, and the teacups, Elsie Turner popped in at dawn for buns, looking like she'd seen a ghost. Said Sir Reginald had been quarrelling fiercely with young Arthur just days ago. Money matters, you know. Arthur's forever scheming about investments in the city, borrowing sums that could sink a ship. And Sir Reginald, bless him, wasn't one to part with pounds lightly. Miss Marple poured her tea, steam curling like phantom clues. Quarrelling, you say? How unfortunate. Arthur seemed devoted last evening. She recalled the nephew's pallor at the foot of the stairs, his arms steadying Lady Margaret, yet his eyes flickering with something akin to relief. "Aye, devoted to the inheritance, perhaps," Mrs. Potts whispered, glancing about as if the walls eavesdropped. "The manor's entailed to him, isn't it? And then there's Lady Margaret, looking drawn these past months. Rumours fly about her and Tom Wilkins, the gardener. He's a sturdy fellow, always tending her roses with extra care, if you catch my drift. Sir Reginald turned a blind eye, or so they say. But who knows what simmers in a marriage?" Before Miss Marple could pursue this thread, the doorbell rang again, admitting Arthur Langley himself. He cut a dashing figure in his tailored coat, though shadows bruised his eyes, suggesting a sleepless night. Spotting Miss Marple, he approached with a forced smile. "Aunt Jane, though you're no kin, you're the village's wise aunt to us all. May I join you? This business has me undone." "Of course, dear boy." Miss Marple gestured to the chair opposite, her knitting emerging from her bag like a faithful companion. The needles clicked rhythmically, a soothing counterpoint to the tension. "You look as if you've borne the brunt of it. How fares Lady Margaret?" Arthur sank into the seat, ordering coffee with a wave. Aunt Margaret's prostrate with grief. Dr. Ellis gave her a sedative. The constable's poking about, but it's clear Uncle slipped after one too many. Those stairs are lethal in low light. His fingers drummed the table, betraying agitation. Miss Marple's eyes, sharp behind her spectacles, noted the tremor, a sign of nerves or guilt. Slipped, yes, yet Sir Reginald was sure-footed, a soldier's balance. And that scuff on the banister, curious, don't you think? As if someone paused there, gripping tightly. Arthur's cup paused midway to his lips. Scuff? I didn't notice. Probably from Graves polishing, or Elsie with her trays. You're not suggesting foul play. His laugh rang hollow, echoing off the tea room's beamed ceiling. Not suggesting, merely observing, Miss Marple replied serenely, her needles flashing. Observations are like breadcrumbs. Follow them, and you reach the gingerbread house, or the witch within. She sipped her tea, watching him over the rim. Arthur shifted, launching into tales of his uncle's generosity, how he'd funded Arthur's ventures despite reservations. He believed in me, you see. Now, with the estate, well, I'll ensure it's managed properly. As Arthur departed, citing errands at the manor, Miss Marple pondered his words. Generosity or coercion? The inheritance loomed large, a motive as old as Cain. She paid her bill and strolled toward the vicarage, the autumn leaves crunching underfoot like brittle alibis. The vicarage, a rambling stone house beside the church, exuded an air of faded piety, its garden overgrown with herbs and holly. Reverend Thomas Hale answered her knock himself, his clerical collar slightly askew, ink stains on his fingers from sermon preparations. Miss Marple. Come in, come in. A sorrowful day for Elderford. Tea, or perhaps something stronger, though I abstain, of course. They settled in the study, lined with dusty tomes and a crucifix that cast long shadows. Miss Marple accepted tea, her gaze roaming. A ledger open on the desk, figures scrawled in red ink. Reverend, you were at the manor last night. Sir Reginald seemed in high spirits. Did anything strike you as amiss? Hale stirred his cup absently. Amiss? Well, he was jovial, yes, but between us, he'd promised a substantial donation to the church roof fund. The harvest sale was to cover it, he said. Yet lately he'd delayed, said funds were tight. I pressed him gently last week. He laughed it off, but there was an edge. The vicar's voice held a note of frustration, quickly veiled by piety. The Lord provides, of course, but that roof leaks like a sieve. Miss Marple nodded sympathetically. Debts can weigh heavily, and Arthur mentioned investments, perhaps Sir Reginald overextended. She recalled the vicar's lingering glance at the silver last evening, a covetous flicker. Hale leaned forward. Arthur, oh, he's a restless soul, always borrowing. And Graves, loyal as a hound, but I sense old grudges. Served with Sir Reginald in India, you know. Whispers of a scandal, jewels gone missing, blame shifted. Graves never speaks of it, but resentment festers. As they conversed, Miss Marple's mind catalogued, motives sprouting like weeds. Debt for the vicar, inheritance for Arthur, perhaps jealousy for the gardener. And Graves, the butler's impassive face masked depths. She rose to leave, but paused at the door. One more thing, Reverend. That rose petal on the landing, crushed oddly, thornless, as if snipped deliberately. Hale blinked. Rose petal. I didn't notice. From Lady Margaret's vase, surely. An accident's debris. Perhaps, Miss Marple murmured, stepping into the sunlight. But accidents didn't snip thorns, nor leave scuffs from waiting hands. The whispers over tea had yielded threads, jealousy, debt, old wounds. Elderford's cosy facade cracked, revealing fissures worth probing. Miss Marple walked homeward, her step light, for the puzzle beckoned, its siren call irresistible to one who listened so keenly. The detective in her stirred, attention commanded by each subtle hint, promising revelations that would make even the most jaded ear hang on every word. Chapter 3. Shadows in the Garden. The afternoon light slanted across Elderford's meadows, turning the hedgerows into ribbons of gold and shadow, as if the sun itself conspired to highlight the village's hidden contours. A gentle breeze stirred the last of the summer's blooms, carrying the earthy tang of turned soil, and the faint, acrid note of burning leaves from distant bonfires. Miss Jane Marple, ever attuned to the rhythms of rural life, paused at her cottage gate to inhale the crisp air, her knitting bag slung over one arm like a faithful sentry. The morning's whispers had seeded doubts in her fertile mind, and now, with the sun at its zenith, she set her course for Harrington Manor once more. Gardens, she reflected, were much like human souls, cultivated to appear orderly, yet harbouring weeds that twisted deep and unseen, ready to choke the unwary. The manor's grounds unfolded before her like a verdant tapestry, paths winding through borders ablaze with asters and dahlias, their petals unfurling in defiance of the encroaching chill. At the heart of it all laboured Tom Wilkins, a man whose frame spoke of years wrestling with the earth, broad-shouldered, sun-weathered, with hands like gnarled roots gripping his shears. In his mid-40s, Tom moved with the deliberate economy of one who knew the soil's secrets, his cap pulled low against the glare. Miss Marple approached along the gravel walk, her steps light, her parasol tapping a rhythm that echoed her thoughts. "Good afternoon, Mr. Wilkins," she called, her voice carrying like a clear bell through the still air. "What a splendid display! These climbers by the side door are a credit to your care. Rosa New Dawn, I believe. Such delicate petals, yet so resilient." Tom straightened, wiping his brow with a sleeve stained by honest toil, his gaze appraising yet guarded, like a fox spotting a hound. "Afternoon, Miss Marple." "Aye, New Dawn they are," Lady Margaret's pride. She fancies the way they soften the stone, though Sir Reginald grumbled they cluttered his view from the study. "You hear about last night? Bad business, that." Miss Marple nodded, her blue eyes, sharp as pins behind her spectacles, taking in the scene. The shears blades glinting, a wheelbarrow heaped with clippings, and there, half buried in the mulch, a lone gardening glove, its mate nowhere in sight. "Bad business indeed. You must have heard the outcry from your cottage. Commendable, rushing back as you did. Did you notice anything untoward in the gardens beforehand? Footprints, perhaps, or a figure lingering where none should?" Tom's shears hesitated mid-snip, a flicker of unease crossing his rugged features. "Nothing out of sorts. Left at sundown, supped alone. My place is just yonder, through the orchard. The cry brought me running, but 'twas over by then. Sir Reginald, he had his ways, but no call for that end." His tone roughened, his eyes softening at Lady Margaret's mention earlier, a telltale warmth that spoke volumes to one versed in the subtle language of affection. "His ways?" Miss Marple echoed mildly, stooping to retrieve the errant glove and offering it with a smile. "Villages are full of such tales, loyalties tested, affections misplaced. Lady Margaret speaks highly of your work. One imagines Sir Reginald did too, despite his grumbles." Tom took the glove, his calloused fingers brushing hers, a hesitation in the gesture. "He tolerated me fine, left the outdoors to my domain. But her ladyship, she's got an eye for beauty in the blooms. If you're fishing for scandal, Miss Marple, there's none here. I tend gardens, not grudges." Yet his voice carried an undercurrent, like the rustle of leaves hiding a serpent, and Miss Marple noted the way his gaze darted to the manor's windows, as if fearing eavesdroppers. She thanked him graciously, her parasol resuming its tap as she turned toward the manor, her mind already sifting the exchange. Tom's defensive burr, the glove's odd placement, dropped in flight or planted like a seed of doubt. The shadows lengthened across the lawn, mirroring the enigmas gathering in her thoughts. Foul play. The notion tugged like a loose thread, promising to unravel more than mere fabric. Entering through the service door, which gave onto the back hall, Miss Marple found the manor steeped in a hush that felt almost reverent, the stone floors echoing her steps like a confessional. The kitchen's warmth enveloped her first, redolent of simmering stock and fresh-baked bread, but she pressed on to the butler's pantry, where Elsie Turner wielded a cloth over an array of silver, her movements frenetic, as if polishing away the night's horrors. At 19, Elsie was a vision of youthful vulnerability, wide eyes framed by curls escaping her cap, cheeks flushed not from heat, but from unshed tears. "Miss Marple!" Elsie exclaimed, the cloth slipping from her grasp. "You gave me a start. Thought you were a ghost, what with the house so quiet. Come for a cuppa, or questions. The constable's been and gone, but it's all so muddled." Miss Marple smiled reassuringly, perching on a stool amid the gleam of candlesticks and trays. "A cup would be lovely, dear, if it's no trouble. These times try us all. You were fond of Sir Reginald, weren't you? Generous with wages for your mother's sake, I recall." Elsie's eyes misted as she busied herself with the kettle. "Fond? He was a gem, slipped me extras when Mum's rheumatism flared. Not like some, all stiff and stern. But lately? Oh, Miss Marple, I shouldn't say. But he and Mr. Graves had a proper row yesterday morn. Over the brandy stock. Sir accused him of dipping in, said the levels were off. Mr. Graves went all icy, denied it flat, but his voice shook like leaves in a gale. Before Miss Marple could probe, the door creaked open, admitting Mr. Edmund Graves himself. Impeccable in his tales, he carried a ledger under one arm, his lean face a study in restraint, though his grey eyes held the wariness of a man cornered. "Miss Marple," he greeted, his tone polished as the silver Elsie buffed. "An unexpected call. Elsie, tend to the linens. The drawing-room needs fresh cloths. Now, if you please." Elsie scurried off, casting a wide-eyed glance back, leaving Miss Marple to face the butler alone. "Mr. Graves, your composure does you credit in such turmoil. Sir Reginald relied on you utterly. Medicines, meals, the run of the house. That vial in Lady Margaret's chamber, the sleeping draught. Potent stuff, I hear. You dispense it, don't you?" Graves set the ledger down with a soft thud, his hands steady but his posture rigid. "As instructed by Dr. Ellis, yes. Her ladyship's headaches require it. Measured doses, no more. If you're implying mishandling." His voice trailed, a chill edge sharpening it, and Miss Marple's gaze dropped to his shoes, gleaming yet marred by a faint scuff on the left toe, as if scraped against unyielding wood in a moment of strain. Mishandling. Heavens, no. Just curious about routines in a house so well ordered. Accidents disrupt them, don't they? Like that glove in the garden. Tom's, I fancy, but oddly astray. Graves's lips thinned. "Garden matters are Wilkins's realm. I confine myself to the indoors. Last night, I was in here, preparing nightcaps when the cry came. A simple fall, tragic but unforeseen." Yet his fingers drummed once on the ledger, a fleeting betrayal of calm, and Miss Marple filed it away, along with the half-empty vial she'd glimpsed in Lady Margaret's boudoir earlier, its label crisp in Graves's hand. She rose, thanking him, but as she departed the pantry, her parasol's tip probing the flagstones, her thoughts whirled like leaves in a vortex. The glove, misplaced as a pawn off its square, the vial depleted beyond a lady's headaches, the scuff echoing the banister's blemish, clues accreted like dew on petals, each a droplet reflecting larger truths. Elderford's tranquillity masked a tempest, and Miss Marple, the quiet storm's eye, felt its draw, an enigma that seized the senses, its veils parting to reveal glimpses of malice, compelling every ear to lean closer, breath held for the next whisper of revelation. Chapter 4. The False Trail. The fourth morning in Elderford dawned with a restless shimmer, as if the village sensed the secrets stirring beneath its idyllic surface. A brisk wind swept through the lanes, rattling the shutters of cottages and sending leaves skittering like furtive whispers across the green. The church bells tolled for a memorial service, their sombre notes blending with the bleat of sheep and the distant hum of a tractor, yet the air carried a tension that belied the pastoral calm. Miss Jane Marple, fortified by a cup of strong Assam and a slice of toast spread with her own damson jam, sat in her parlour, her notebook open before her. Its pages bore the weight of her observations, the scuff on the banister, the thornless rose petal, the hushed quarrel between Sir Reginald and Mr. Graves over brandy. Each clue was a thread in a tapestry of deceit, and Miss Marple, with her unerring knack for human nature, felt the pattern tightening. "A false trail," she murmured to Percival, who blinked lazily from his cushion, "is as revealing as a true one, for it shows what someone wishes to hide." Her morning's mission led her back to Harrington Manor, where the air held a chill that lingered beyond the autumn's bite. The village was abuzz with a new development. Constable Briggs, a young man whose enthusiasm outpaced his acumen, had announced a discovery on the grand staircase. A crude length of fishing line, stretched taut across the 5th step, barely visible against the polished oak. He greeted Miss Marple in the manor's hall, his uniform slightly askew, his notebook brandished like a trophy. "Miss Marple, we've cracked it!" A tripwire, plain as day, meant to send Sir Reginald tumbling, and the lines from Tom Wilkins's shed, "He's our man, mark my words." Miss Marple's eyebrows lifted, her spectacles catching the chandelier's dim glow. "A tripwire, Constable. How very dramatic. Have you spoken with Mr. Wilkins? He struck me as devoted to his roses, not to mischief." Briggs nodded, his chest puffed with purpose. "Oh, aye, he's denying it, but that's to be expected. Says he was in his cottage, supping alone, but the line's his, and everyone knows he's sweet on Lady Margaret. A lover's jealousy, I reckon, wanted Sir out of the way." She followed him to the staircase, where the fishing line lay coiled on a side table, its ends frayed and faintly scented with a curious musk. Not garden soil, but something sharper, like the wax polish used in the manor's pews. Miss Marple knelt, her fingers brushing the step where the line had been tied. The knots were sloppy, almost ostentatious, as if begging discovery. "Intriguing," she mused, her voice soft as the dust motes dancing in the light. "A trap so blatant it invites scrutiny. And this scent, more church than shed, wouldn't you say?" Briggs frowned, puzzled, but Miss Marple pressed on, her steps leading to the manor's library, where Lady Margaret sat alone, a ledger open before her, her mourning black softened by a silk scarf. Her face, pale beneath its powder, betrayed a fragility that seemed rehearsed, like an actress awaiting her cue. "Miss Marple," she greeted, her voice tremulous, "you've heard about this dreadful wire. Surely Tom couldn't. He's been with us for years." Miss Marple settled into a leather armchair, her knitting bag at her side, needles poised, but still. "Years indeed, and loyal, from what I gather." "But Sir Reginald had his suspicions, didn't he? About Tom's attentions to you. And Arthur, too. His ventures in London must have strained the estate's coffers." Lady Margaret's fingers twisted her scarf, her sapphire ring catching the light. "Reginald was prone to fancies. Jealousy, perhaps, but unfounded. Tom's a gardener, nothing more. As for Arthur, he's ambitious, yes, but Reginald always forgave his debts. The manor passes to him now, of course." Her gaze flickered, as if gauging Miss Marple's intent, and the older woman noted the deflection, a widow's grief, yet laced with calculation. "Forgiveness is a virtue," Miss Marple said mildly, "but debts can weigh heavily. I heard of a stranger seen near the manor that evening, a tall man in a greatcoat, loitering by the orchard gate. Did Sir Reginald mention any unexpected visitors?" Lady Margaret's hand stilled, her lips parting slightly. "A stranger?" "No, he said nothing of the sort. Peddlers come and go. Reginald dismissed them sharply. Perhaps a vagrant, lost in the lanes. Do look into it, Jane. Your eye for detail is the talk of Elderford." The suggestion, so swiftly offered, pricked Miss Marple's instincts. She thanked Lady Margaret and made her way to the Black Swan Inn, a timbered establishment where the taproom served as the village's second confessional. Mr. Hargrove, the landlord, a jovial man with a nose reddened by years of sampling his own ale, leaned across the bar as she posed her query over a glass of elderflower cordial. "A stranger, Miss Marple." Aye, one passed through late that afternoon. Tall, muffled in a coat too heavy for the weather, hat low over his eyes. Asked for the manor, said he had business with Sir Reginald, something about old regimental ties. Drank half a pint and scarpered when I asked his name. Boots caked in mud, mined. Looked like he'd tramped the manor grounds already. Miss Marple's pulse quickened, though her expression remained serene. Mud, you say? And his manner, nervous perhaps. Hargrove nodded, describing a fair-haired man with a city accent, a valise clutched tightly. The details nagged, too close to Arthur's profile, yet Arthur had been at the gathering. A disguise or a deliberate misdirection? Her next stop was the vicarage, where Reverend Hale was pruning his herb garden, his sleeves rolled up, his face etched with the strain of recent days. "Miss Marple, a welcome sight," he said, brushing soil from his hands. "This business with the tripwire, dreadful. You're not convinced it's Tom, are you?" "Not entirely," she replied, her gaze drifting to the church spire visible over the hedge. "You confirmed Arthur's presence here for tea that afternoon. Around 4, was it? Your clock, I recall, tends to lag." Hale chuckled, a touch nervously. 5 minutes slow, as always. Arthur was here, discussing the harvest fund, pledged a sum once the estate settles. Left before evensong, I'd say. The discrepancy struck her. If the clock lagged, Arthur's departure could place him near the manor at dusk, time enough to play the stranger. As she left, a boy from the inn dashed up, breathless. "Miss Marple!" That stranger, spotted again, running for the station. She hurried there, only to find a discarded greatcoat in a ditch, its pockets empty save for a torn ticket stub. London to Elderford, dated the fatal day. Too convenient, she thought, a trail laid to mislead. Back in her cottage, Miss Marple spread her notes by the fire, Percival purring at her feet. The stranger was a phantom, a decoy to divert her from the manor's heart. Arthur's debts, Lady Margaret's deft evasions, Graves's icy control, the tripwire's waxen scent, the stranger's muddied boots, each pointed away from truth like a path rerouted through brambles. The puzzle sang to her, its notes sharp and beguiling, demanding her keenest faculties. Elderford's cosy facade was a mask, and Miss Marple, the quiet detective, leaned into the chase, each clue a spark in a narrative that gripped like a winter's tale, promising revelations as vivid and inevitable as the frost now tracing the village's ancient pains. Chapter 5. Echoes from the Past. The mist that had veiled Elderford, at dawn, clung stubbornly into midday, draping the village in a silvery haze that softened edges and muffled sounds, as if the world conspired to hush its revelations. Miss Jane Marple, seated at her cottage's lace-curtained window, sipped her midday lapsang souchong, the smoky brew a counterpoint to the fog's cool embrace. Her notebook lay open on the table, its entries a constellation of curiosities, the banister's scuff, the severed rose petal, the pantry quarrel, the tripwire's waxy scent, and the phantom stranger's muddy bootprints. Each was a pebble in a pond, rippling outward, but the centre, the motive, remained obscured. "The past," she confided to Percival, who stretched languidly on the hearthrug, "is a locked drawer. One must find the key before the secrets spill forth like forgotten letters." Impelled by this certainty, Miss Marple donned her gabardine mackintosh and ventured to the village hall, a squat edifice of weathered stone that doubled as archive and assembly room. Its upper chamber, reached by a creaking staircase, housed the parish records, tended by Mrs. Agnes Tuttle, a wiry spinster whose spectacles magnified eyes sharp as a raven's. The room was a labyrinth of oak shelves groaning under ledgers bound in faded leather, the air thick with the must of aged paper and sealing wax. Dust motes swirled in the narrow beams from mullioned windows, illuminating Miss Marple as she ascended. "Mrs. Tuttle," she greeted, her voice cutting through the gloom like a polite summons. "A fine day for delving into history despite the mist. I'm tracing Sir Reginald's footsteps, his service in India, particularly with his Batman, Mr. Graves." Whispers reach me of shadows from those campaigns. Mrs. Tuttle adjusted her spectacles, a gleam of relish in her eye, as if the fog had preserved tales ripe for the telling. She shuffled to a shelf labelled Overseas Service, extracting a volume thick as a family Bible. India, eh? Exotic climes breed exotic woes. Sir Reginald, a major then, posted to Calcutta in the teens. Regimental balls, Raja's feasts. Graves was his shadow, loyal till the monsoon broke. Ah, here, the Raja's sapphire necklace, gone like smoke from a locked safe during a gala in 19. Fingers pointed at Graves. He was drummed out, reputation in tatters. Sir Reginald testified to seeing him near the safe, but no gems surfaced. Queer that, the colonel returned flush enough to snap up this manner. Charity, some said. Cover-up, others muttered. Miss Marple's fingers traced the brittle page, the ink faded, but the scandal vivid. A cover-up? Bold words. Did Graves ever hint at injustice? He serves so quietly now, one would think the wound healed. Mrs. Tuttle leaned closer, her whisper conspiratorial. Healed. Scars itch, Miss Marple. Graves came here broken, took the butler's post like a penance. Never a word against Sir Reginald, but his eyes, cold as the Ganges at dawn. The jewels, vanished into thin air, or a colonel's, pockets. Who'd challenge a hero? The archive's chill seeped deeper, and Miss Marple thanked her hostess, descending with the ledger's echo in her mind. A framed injustice, festering for decades. Could it bloom into murder? The scuff on the banister, the gloved talc, a servant's hand, poised for reckoning. Her path led next to St. Mary's churchyard, where gravestones tilted like forgotten sentinels amid the mist-shrouded yews. Reverend Hale was within the vestry, sorting vestments with a distracted air, his face drawn as if the parish's burdens pressed heavier since the tragedy. Miss Marple, a timely visit. The memorial's set for Thursday. This fog, it mirrors the soul's confusion, does it not? She smiled faintly, settling on a pew's edge. Confusion indeed, Reverend. Sir Reginald's promises to the roof fund. Delayed, you mentioned. Did he confide other worries? Echoes from his past, perhaps, that troubled his sleep. Hale's hands paused over a surplice, his gaze distant. Worries. He was a rock, but even rocks crack. Yesterday, tidying the records, I found this, tucked in the ledger like a guilty secret. He produced a scrap of paper, yellowed, bearing Sir Reginald's bold script. Graves knows too. The vicar's voice dropped, slipped between pages on donations, dated a fortnight gone. I thought it a reminder, but now, with the fall. Miss Marple examined the note, her spectacles low. Knows too much. About what, one wonders? The Indian affair, perhaps. Graves's loyalty seems ironclad, yet iron rusts. Hale fidgeted, his collar chafing. Loyalty? Aye, but strained. Sir Reginald chided me for pressing Arthur on contributions, said the lad was tangled in his own webs. As for Graves, a donation arrived anonymously last month, sizable enough for slates. Cash, no note. Could it be atonement or hush money? The implications swirled. Blackmail veiled as benevolence. A past debt demanding payment in blood. Miss Marple pocketed the note's image in her mind and rose. Webs within webs, Reverend. Thank you. Light in the fog. Outside the mist thinned, revealing the manor's silhouette. She veered toward the side gate, where a hedge clutched a forgotten scrap. A pencil sketch of the staircase, an X crudely marked at the landing. Not Sir Reginald's hand, too hesitant, but whose? A planner's map, or a killer's blueprint? Seeking clarity, she found Elsie in the manor's scullery, elbow deep in soapy water, her curls damp and her eyes shadowed. Miss Marple. The house feels hollow, echoes everywhere. Come for tea? Or more on that wire? Tom's beside himself, swears he never touched it. Miss Marple perched on a stool, her tone soothing. Beside himself, and rightly so, if innocence speaks. You mentioned Lady Margaret and Tom in the gardens, whispers of plans. In these shadows, even affection can cast long ones. Elsie's cloth twisted, suds dripping like tears. Plans, I overheard. Aye, last week, by the roses. Once it's settled, she said, her voice soft as petals, we could slip away. Tom hushed her, but his eyes, full of longing. Sir Reginald suspected, I think, watched them sharp. But murder? Tom's no killer. He's earth and sun, not shadows. Miss Marple nodded, her mind layering. A lover's flight thwarted, or a convenient veil. The sketch burned in her reticule, its X aligning with the petal's fall. As she left, a glint caught her eye in the hall, a scratch on the landing's board, as if a vial cap had skittered free, then been reclaimed. Evening found her homeward bound, the mist yielding to stars pricking the velvet sky. By her fireside, Percival curled at her feet. Miss Marple pondered. Graves's disgrace, Hale's cryptic note, Margaret's escape dreams, the sketcher's intent. Threads from yesteryear tugged the present into peril, a tapestry fraying at the edges. The enigma pulsed, its cadence urgent and alluring, drawing her deeper into Elderford's veiled heart. Miss Marple, the serene sleuth, embraced the pursuit, each echo a note in a haunting refrain that ensnared the listener, breath baited for the symphony's swell. Chapter 6. The Misdirected Clue. By the fifth day, Elderford's tranquil veneer had begun to crack, its pastoral calm ruffled like a pond disturbed by a flung stone. The morning sun pierced the lingering mist, casting long shadows across the village green, where sparrows darted and the postman's bicycle gleamed with dew. Yet the air thrummed with an unspoken tension, as if the very hedgerows whispered of secrets too weighty for daylight. Miss Jane Marple, fortified by a pot of Earl Grey and a slice of Mrs. Potts's lemon drizzle, sat in her cottage, her notebook a mosaic of clues, the banister's scuff, the thornless petal, the pantry dispute, the waxy fishing line, the cryptic note, and the staircase sketch's ominous X. Each was a stitch in a pattern, but the design twisted, leading her down paths deliberately muddied. A misdirected clue, she murmured to Percival, who flicked his tail with disdain. Is a lantern swung to blind, not guide. Determined to chase this false light, Miss Marple set out for Harrington Manor, her sensible brogues crunching the gravel path. The manor's facade loomed, its Georgian symmetry softened by ivy that clung like whispered secrets. Constable Briggs met her in the hall, his youthful zeal undimmed, his helmet slightly askew as he clutched a new discovery, a monogrammed cufflink, silver and gleaming, found near the staircase's base. Miss Marple, it's Arthur Langley's, his initials, plain as day, and with that tripwire from Tom's shed, we're closing in. A conspiracy maybe, jealousy and greed hand in hand. Miss Marple's spectacles glinted as she examined the cufflink, its AL engraving bold yet suspiciously pristine. A conspiracy, constable? Or a stage prop, placed to dazzle the eye? This cufflink shines too brightly for a careless loss. And the fishing line, it's not so clumsy, it's scent more vestry than garden. Let's hear from Mr. Wilkins again. They found Tom in the orchard, pruning apple trees with a vigour that spoke of pent frustration. His cap was pushed back, revealing a brow furrowed with indignation. Miss Marple! They're pinning it on me, that line on the stairs. Swear on my life, I never touched it. My shed's open to all. Anyone could have filched it. I was at my cottage eating cold pie. When the cry went up, Miss Marple's gaze softened, noting his calloused hands, free of deceit's tremor. I believe you, Mr. Wilkins. But tell me, did you see anyone near the manor's back door that evening? A shadow, perhaps, moving with purpose? Tom's shears paused, his eyes narrowing. Now you mention it, I saw Mr. Graves by the kitchen gate, just as dusk settled. Carrying a bottle. Thought it was wine for dinner, but he looked furtive, like a fox with a stolen egg. Odd for him, always so proper. The image sparked, Graves, outside his domain, with a bottle that might not hold wine. Miss Marple thanked Tom and entered the manor, her steps leading to the butler's pantry, where Mr. Graves polished crystal with mechanical precision. His lean frame was taut, his grey eyes like clouded glass as she approached. "Mr. Graves, you've borne this tragedy with remarkable steadiness. Yet Tom saw you by the kitchen gate that evening, with a bottle. An unusual errand, surely." Graves's cloth slowed, his voice smooth as the crystal he held. "A misapprehension, Miss Marple. I was in here, preparing Sir Reginald's nightcap, sherry, as always. The gardens are Tom's province. Perhaps he mistook a groundsman for me." But his fingers tightened, a fleeting crack in his composure, and Miss Marple noted a faint smudge on his cuff. Talc, like that on the staircase's threshold. "Talc," she mused aloud, her tone disarming. "Curious how it lingers. On gloves, perhaps, to keep a grip clean. You handle Lady Margaret's medicines, don't you? That sleeping draught. Chloral hydrate, Dr. Ellis called it. Potent enough to dull a man's step." Graves's gaze hardened, though his voice remained even. "The draught is for her ladyship's headaches, measured precisely. You're weaving fancies, Miss Marple. As for the cufflink, Arthur's carelessness speaks for itself, scattered about like his debts." The deflection was swift, and Miss Marple filed it away, her needles clicking a soft counterpoint from her bag. Seeking Arthur, she found him in the manor's study, rifling through papers with a distracted air, his tie askew and his fair hair mussed. "Miss Marple," he greeted, forcing a grin. "You're relentless. This cufflink nonsense. Briggs thinks I'm a villain now. I lost that pair ages ago. Someone's playing tricks, aren't they?" "Tricks indeed," she replied, settling into a chair, her eyes scanning the desk. A ledger open to red-inked figures, a fountain pen uncapped. "Your alibi with Reverend Hale falters. The vicarage clock runs slow. Where were you at dusk, Arthur, before the tragedy?" He paled, his fingers crumpling a receipt. "Dusk? I wandered the grounds after tea, needed air. Uncle's lectures on my loans were stifling. I was near the orchard, nowhere near the stairs." His voice wavered, pleading innocence, or crafting it, and Miss Marple noted a smudge on the window pane behind him, talc-like, as if brushed by a sleeve in haste. Leaving the manor, she paused by the staircase, its oak gleaming under morning light. The fishing line's waxy scent nagged, too deliberate for a gardener's tool. A closer look revealed a tiny splinter in the banister's scuff, as if a ring or tool had grazed it. A mark of struggle, not polish. And there, in the carpet's weave, a speck of wax, soft and pale, like drippings from a candle held aloft in the dark. Miss Marple's next stop was the church, where she found Reverend Hale tending the altar, his hands trembling as he arranged candles. "Miss Marple, you're a beacon in this fog," he said, his smile strained. "The tripwire, monstrous. And now Arthur's cufflink. It's as if the manor's cursed, not cursed, Reverend, misled," she said gently. "That anonymous donation to the church, cash you said, just before the tragedy. Could it have come from someone seeking absolution? And your candles, did they use the same wax as the manor's?" Hale blinked, startled. "Absolution. I thought it Sir Reginald's, belatedly sent. The wax? Standard church stock, but yes, the manor orders similar. Why?" His voice faltered, sensing her probe, and Miss Marple smiled, deflecting with a comment on the altar's lilies. Back in her cottage, she spread her clues before the fire. The cufflink, too pristine. The fishing line, scented to mislead. The wax speck, tying manor to vestry. Graves's furtive bottle. Arthur's shaky alibi. The misdirected clue was a smokescreen, shielding the true hand. Graves's, perhaps, with his shadowed past, or another, weaving deception with care. The puzzle thrummed, its layers peeling back to reveal a core of calculated intent. Elderford's cosy charm was a facade, and Miss Marple, the quiet sleuth, leaned into the chase, each hint a note in a gripping score that held listeners spellbound, its cadence promising a truth as sharp and inevitable as the frost now kissing the village's ancient stones. Chapter 7. Threads Unraveling. The sixth morning in Elderford dawned with a fragile clarity, the mist of previous days yielding to a sky of polished blue, its brilliance a stark contrast to the village's shadowed mood. The green bustled softly, housewives bartered gossip over baskets of apples, and the blacksmith's hammer rang like a metronome. Yet beneath this pastoral hum, a current of unease pulsed, as if Elderford sensed the threads of deceit tightening around. Harrington Manor's tragedy. Miss Jane Marple, fortified by a breakfast of porridge and her own quince jelly, sat by her parlour fire, her notebook a tapestry of clues. The banister's scuff, the thornless petal, the pantry dispute, the waxy fishing line, the cryptic note, the staircase sketch, Arthur's cufflink, and the wax speck. Each was a knot in a web, and Miss Marple, with her needle-sharp mind, felt the pattern nearing its reveal. "Threads unravel," she murmured to Percival, who blinked from his cushion, "when one tugs with care." Determined to pull at these strands, Miss Marple arranged a gathering at the manor, cloaked as a condolence tea, but designed to probe the suspect's facades. The drawing-room, its heavy drapes parted to admit pale sunlight, was a stage of quiet tension, the air scented with beeswax and the faint tang of grief. Lady Margaret presided over a silver teapot, her mourning black softened by a lace collar, her face a mask of sorrow tinged with strain. Arthur Langley slouched by the mantel, his city polish dulled, his fingers fidgeting with a cigarette case. Reverend Hale sat stiffly, his prayer book clutched like a shield, his eyes darting as if seeking absolution. Mr. Graves moved with silent precision, serving scones, his butler's calm a veneer over something tauter. Elsie Turner, her apron crisp, hovered with a tray, her gaze flitting nervously between guests. Miss Marple took her seat by the hearth, her knitting bag at her feet, needles poised like a conductor's baton. "A comfort to gather," she began, her voice as warm as the fire's glow. "In times that test us, Sir Reginald's fall was no mere mischance, I fear. The clues suggest a hand guided his fate. Lady Margaret, his dizziness troubled you. Did his tonic ever seem altered?" Lady Margaret's cup clinked, her sapphire ring flashing. "Altered? No, Jane. It was Dr. Ellis's blend. Iron and herbs, nothing more. Reginald was stubborn, climbing those stairs alone despite his spells." Her tone trembled, but her eyes were dry, and Miss Marple noted the practiced cadence, like a line rehearsed for a village play. Arthur exhaled sharply, lighting a cigarette. "Uncle was a bull, but age catches up. That staircase is a death trap, polished to a mirror's sheen. I told him to mind the rail." His voice was earnest, but his fingers shook, ash falling unnoticed, and Miss Marple's gaze lingered on his cuff, newly adorned, the lost cufflink replaced. Reverend Hale coughed, adjusting his collar. "The Lord's will is mysterious, but Sir Reginald's delays with the church fund vexed us. He meant to pay after the harvest sale, yet funds were tight," he said. His fingers twisted the prayer book, betraying a flicker of resentment, and Miss Marple recalled his ledger's red ink, a silent plea for relief. Graves, refilling cups, was a study in control, but Miss Marple pressed gently. "Mr. Graves, your diligence is the manor's backbone. That vial in Lady Margaret's room, chloral hydrate, for her headaches. Enough to cloud a man's senses if misjudged, perhaps." Graves's hand steadied the teapot, his grey eyes cold. "Her ladyship's dose is precise, Miss Marple, as per the doctor's orders." "If you're suggesting error—" His voice was smooth, but a muscle twitched in his jaw, and Miss Marple noted the faint talc smudge on his cuff, mirroring the staircase's dust. Elsie, hovering, dropped a spoon with a clatter, her cheeks flaming. "Oh, Miss Marple, it's all so grim." Sir was kind, gave me extra for Mum's doctor, but he and Mr. Graves had words that morning, sharp ones, over the cellar accounts. I heard 'em from the hall, though I didn't mean to. Her voice quavered, and Graves's glance at her was sharp enough to cut glass. Miss Marple's needles resumed their rhythm, a soft click anchoring her thoughts. The room buzzed with undercurrents. Arthur's nerves, Hale's veiled pique, Lady Margaret's calculated grief, Graves's icy control, Elsie's fear. Excusing herself to freshen up, she slipped into the service corridor, its flagstones cool underfoot. There, behind a broom cupboard, she found a prize, a small cotton bag, its drawstring loose, containing grains of white powder, talc laced with a chemical bite, and a crumpled label in Graves's meticulous hand. Sedative, 10 milliliters nightly. Her pulse quickened as she pocketed the find, her mind racing. Chloral hydrate, potent enough to dull a man's wits, could have laced Sir Reginald's sherry, ensuring a fatal misstep. The cellar dispute. Had Graves tampered with more than accounts? Returning to the drawing room, she steered the conversation to history. "Reverend, you spoke of Sir Reginald's Indian days." "Mr. Graves, you shared those years, bonds forged in hardship, yet sometimes strained?" Graves's lips thinned. "Ancient history, Miss Marple. The master gave me purpose after trials. We needn't revisit old campaigns." His tone was clipped, but his hand brushed the scuff on his shoe, a mark Miss Marple now tied to the banister's scar, a pause for leverage. Arthur interjected, too swiftly. "India's dust and done. Uncle worried more about my ventures. He'd have backed me, given time." His bravado faltered under her gaze, and she noted his cigarette case, monogrammed like the cufflink, gleaming with forced innocence. Lady Margaret sighed, her lace collar fluttering. "Reginald carried burdens, Arthur's loans, the church's needs. And Tom, he suspected indiscretions, though I assured him they were baseless." Her voice wavered, but her hands were steady, and Miss Marple sensed a thread of truth beneath the denial. The tea ended, and Miss Marple lingered by the staircase, its oak gleaming like a silent witness. A new detail emerged, a faint gouge in the landing's wood, as if a heel had pivoted hard, a calculated stance, not a stumble. The wax speck, she realized, matched the candles in Graves's pantry, suggesting a vigil lit for darker purpose. Back in her cottage, Miss Marple spread her clues before the fire, the cotton bag and its label glinting accusingly. The threads were unravelling. Graves's Indian wound, Hale's donation hint, Margaret's whispered plans, Arthur's shaky alibi. The tripwire and cufflink were decoys designed to scatter suspicion like chaff. The true hand, Graves's with his access and old grudge, loomed larger, the sedative bag a confession in cloth. The puzzle sang, its notes sharp and urgent, a melody of deceit that held her rapt. Elderford's cosy facade was peeling, revealing a lattice of motives: greed, betrayal, revenge. Miss Marple, the quiet detective, leaned into the chase, her senses alight with the thrill of nearing truth, each clue a chord in a gripping narrative that promised a crescendo as rich and inevitable as dawn breaking over the village's timeless hills. Chapter 8. The Hidden Motive. The seventh morning in Elderford broke with a crystalline sharpness, the sky a taut canopy of blue that belied the village's undercurrent of disquiet. Frost traced delicate patterns on cottage windows, and the green sparkled under a low sun, where villagers moved with the cautious tread of those sensing a storm beneath the calm. Miss Jane Marple, warmed by a pot of Assam and a slice of her own blackberry jam on toast, sat in her cosy parlour, her notebook a chronicle of enigmas. The banister's scuff, the thornless petal, the pantry dispute, the waxy fishing line, the cryptic note, the staircase sketch, Arthur's cufflink, the wax speck, and the sedative laced cotton bag. Each clue was a whisper from a shadowed past, and Miss Marple, with her unerring instinct for human frailty, felt the truth hovering like a moth near a flame. Motive, she murmured to Percival, who yawned regally by the hearth, is the ember that sets the heart ablaze. Her quest led her to Dr. Ellis's surgery, a modest red brick building across from St. Mary's, its shingle swaying in the breeze. The doctor, a lean man in his 60s, with spectacles forever slipping and a habit of humming hymns, welcomed her into a cluttered office, smelling of carbolic and old books. Miss Marple, a pleasure. Those sombre days, eh? Sir Reginald's loss weighs heavy. Come for a tonic, or is it curiosity? His smile was kind, but his eyes held a flicker of unease. No tonic, doctor, just clarity, Miss Marple replied, settling into a worn chair. Sir Reginald's health. Lady Margaret spoke of dizziness, yet he seemed robust. His tonic, you prescribed it. Could it have been tampered with? Ellis adjusted his glasses, his fingers pausing over a prescription pad. Tampered? Good heavens, no. It was a simple restorative, iron and bitters, to steady his nerves. He complained of light-headedness, but I found no cause beyond age, and perhaps a touch too much sherry. The autopsy confirmed it. Heart sound, death from a broken neck. He hesitated, then added, though his pupils were oddly dilated, more than a fall accounts for. I chalked it up to shock, but now you mention tampering. Miss Marple's pulse quickened, though her face remained serene. Dilated pupils? As from a sedative, perhaps. Lady Margaret's chloral hydrate. Strong stuff, I hear. You entrusted it to Mr. Graves, didn't you? Ellis's brow furrowed, his hum faltering. Graves, yes, meticulous as a clockmaker. The drafts for her headaches, measured to a drop. But in excess, it could muddle a man's senses, make stairs a peril. Surely you don't think... His voice trailed, doubt creeping in like frost through a crack. Thank you, Doctor, Miss Marple said, rising. Precision is a virtue, but even clocks can be set wrong. Her mind whirred. Chloral hydrate, slipped into a nightcap, could ensure a fatal stumble. Graves, with his access and shadowed history, stood at the puzzle's edge. Next, she sought Elsie Turner in the Manor's laundry, where steam rose from copper tubs, cloaking the room in a humid haze. Elsie scrubbed linens with a fervour born of nerves, her curls damp and her eyes red-rimmed. Miss Marple, you startled me. Thought it was Mr. Graves checking my work. Everything's so grim since, you know. Her voice quavered, her hands trembling over the washboard. Miss Marple perched on a stool, her tone soothing as chamomile. Grim indeed, dear. You've a keen eye in this house. Any oddities in the linens? Stains, perhaps, or items misplaced? Elsie's scrub paused, her voice a whisper. Well, I found a shirt of Mr. Graves's, tucked in the servant's wash, with a queer smell. Bitter, like medicine gone off. Thought it was spilled tonic, but it lingered sharp-like. And his shoes, when I brushed 'em, scuff wouldn't shift, like he'd scraped 'em hard somewhere. Miss Marple's fingers tightened on her reticule. A shirt tainted with chloral hydrate. The scuff, tying Graves to the banister. And Sir Reginald's medicines. Did you ever see Mr. Graves handle them beyond routine? Elsie nodded, eyes wide. Once, in the pantry, late, he was measuring from a vial into a glass, said it was for her ladyship, but it was Sir's favourite tumbler, heavy crystal. I thought it odd, but didn't dare ask. Her voice dropped, fear threading through. The revelation landed like a pebble in a still pond. Miss Marple thanked Elsie and ventured to the village hall where Mr. Phipps, a retired clerk with a memory sharper than his rheumy eyes, kept unofficial manor records. His attic room was a chaos of ledgers and tea stains, but he greeted her with a gap-toothed grin. Miss Marple, chasing ghosts again. What's it now? Sir Reginald's old wars. His time with Mr. Graves, she replied, accepting a chipped mug of tea. Any tales of debts settled or silences bought? Phipps rifled through a ledger, his finger pausing on a yellowed page. Here, 1920, a payment from Sir Reginald, marked Calcutta obligation. No name but hefty, enough for a butler's loyalty or to hush a wrong. After the jewel theft, Graves was broken. Sir Reginald gave him a post here. Generous, most thought, but some whispered it was payment for silence. Graves knew something, and it burned. Miss Marple's mind spun. A silenced scandal, perhaps the truth of stolen sapphires. The note, "Graves knows too," suggested fear of betrayal. Blackmail turned to murder. She thanked Phipps and returned to the manor, pausing by the staircase. The gouge in the landing's wood, noted earlier, was deeper than she'd thought. A heel's pivot, deliberate and forceful. Nearby, a faint smear of polish, not the staircase's wax, but softer, like the residue of a servant's glove. Seeking Reverend Hale, she found him in the churchyard, tending a yew with a distracted air. "Miss Marple, you're tireless," he said, his voice weary. "This tragedy, it's shaken us all." "Questions still?" "One or two," she replied, her gaze steady. "That anonymous donation, substantial just before Sir Reginald's fall. Could it have been Mr. Graves, easing a burdened soul?" Hale's trowel stilled, his face paling. "Graves? I assumed it was Sir Reginald, belatedly fulfilling his pledge. Cash, no note, left in the vestry. But Graves, his silences weigh heavy." His voice faltered, as if sensing her probe's depth. Miss Marple's thoughts crystallized. The sedative's trace, Graves's stained shirt, the gouge, the payment. The fishing line and cufflink were distractions, but the true clues, polish, scuff, vial, pointed to a calculated hand. Back in her cottage, she laid her finds before the fire. The cotton bag, its chemical tang a silent accusation. Graves's Indian disgrace, Hale's donation, Arthur's debts, Margaret's deflections, all wove a net, but Graves's shadow loomed largest. The puzzle thrummed, its notes sharp and compelling, a symphony of deceit that held her rapt. Elderford's cosy charm, master cauldron of old wounds, and Miss Marple, the quiet sleuth, leaned into the chase, each clue a spark in a narrative as gripping as a winter's tale, promising a truth as inevitable as frost on a November dawn. Chapter 9. The Revelation in the Drawing Room. The 8th evening in Elderford descended with a velvet hush, the village cloaked in twilight's embrace, its cottages aglow with lamplight that flickered like cautious whispers against the encroaching dark. The air was sharp with the promise of frost, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and late-blooming roses from the manor's gardens. Miss Jane Marple, seated by her cottage hearth, reviewed her notebook's litany of clues. The banister's scuff, the thornless petal, the pantry dispute, the waxy fishing line, the cryptic note, the staircase sketch, Arthur's cufflink, the wax speck, the sedative-laced bag, and the gouge in the landing's wood. Each was a note in a discordant symphony, and tonight, in the manor's drawing room, she would conduct its resolution. "Truth," she murmured to Percival, who dozed with one eye half open, "is a guest who arrives unbidden, but only when the table is set." Miss Marple had orchestrated a gathering under the guise of shared remembrance, but its true purpose was to unveil the killer lurking among the mourners. The drawing room of Harrington Manor, its velvet drapes parted to reveal a sky pricked with stars, was a stage of subdued elegance, the fire casting long shadows across polished mahogany and chintz. Lady Margaret sat by the tea table, her mourning black softened by a single amethyst brooch, her hands steady, but her eyes wary, like a doe scenting danger. Arthur Langley lounged by the mantel, his cigarette smoke curling like a question mark, his city polish fraying under sleepless strain. Reverend Hale clutched his prayer book, his knuckles white, as if it anchored him against a storm. Mr. Graves moved with silent precision, offering biscuits, his butler's mask unyielding, yet betrayed by a faint tremor in his hand. Elsie Turner, her apron swapped for a plain dress, hovered with a tray, her cheeks pale as the china she carried. Miss Marple took her place by the hearth, her lavender cardigan and spectacles lending her the air of a benign aunt, though her gaze was sharp as a blade. "My dear friends," she began, her voice soft yet resonant, cutting through the room's tension like a thread through fabric. "We gather to honour Sir Reginald, but also to seek justice. His fall was no accident. A hand guided him to his end, weaving clues to mislead. Tonight, we unravel that deceit." A collective breath caught, cups clinking faintly. Lady Margaret's brooch glinted as she leaned forward. Arthur's cigarette paused, Hale's prayer book slipped, and Elsie's tray trembled. Graves alone stood still, his grey eyes like clouded mirrors. Miss Marple continued, her needles idle in her lap. The staircase was a stage for murder. Chloral hydrate from Lady Margaret's vial laced Sir Reginald's sherry, dulling his senses. A push at the landing ensured his fall. The scuff on the banister marks a braced foot, the gouge a pivoting heel. The thornless petal, snipped for a buttonhole, fell in haste. The talc-like powder, chemical-tinged, betrays a gloved hand. And the wax speck, from a candle held aloft, lit the killer's vigil. Arthur exhaled sharply, his voice tight. "Murder!" "Miss Marple, that's madness. Uncle was tipsy. Those stairs are slick as ice. Who'd do such a thing?" Her gaze swept the room, settling on Graves. "Mr. Graves, your service to this house is impeccable, yet your past with Sir Reginald casts a long shadow. In Calcutta, a sapphire necklace vanished, and you bore the blame, disgraced, while Sir Reginald returned wealthy. The note, Graves knows too, shows his fear of your knowledge. You waited on that staircase, didn't you? Sherry spiked, candle in hand, talc on your gloves, a rose in your buttonhole. Graves's hand froze on the teapot, his face draining of colour. Absurd, Miss Marple. I served loyally. Why revisit a wound 30 years healed? You've no proof, only fancies his voice was steady, but his fingers betrayed a tremor, and Miss Marple noted the scuff on his shoe, a silent echo of the banister's mark. Lady Margaret gasped, her hand clutching Arthur's arm. "Edmund!" Impossible! He was Reginald's shadow, trusted utterly. Her voice quavered, but her eyes flickered with relief, as if a veil had lifted. Reverend Hale stammered, "The wax. My vestry candles are common stock. Anyone could have used them. And that donation, I thought it Sir Reginald's, not Graves's." His prayer book fell, pages fluttering like startled birds. Miss Marple's spectacles glinted as she produced the cotton bag from her reticule, its label stark in Graves's script. "No fancies, Mr. Graves. This bag, found in the service corridor, holds chloral hydrate traces. The wax matches your pantry candles, not the vestry's. Elsie saw you with Sir Reginald's tumbler, pouring from a vial. The fishing line and cufflink were decoys, meant to scatter blame to Tom and Arthur. But the petal, the gouge, the talc, they point to you." Elsie's tray clattered, a cup shattering on the rug. "I didn't mean to speak out, Miss Marple." But that shirt, bitter smelling, in his wash. Her voice broke, fear overtaking her. Graves's composure shattered, his shoulders sagging. "Enough," he whispered, his voice raw. "In India, he betrayed me, took the jewels, let me rot in disgrace. I served him, swallowed the shame, but his taunts. That night, the sherry was my chance. A drop too many, a nudge. It was justice, not murder." His confession hung, heavy as the drapes, a truth bared like bone. Lady Margaret sobbed. Arthur stared, frozen, and Hale crossed himself, murmuring prayers. Constable Briggs, summoned by Miss Marple's discreet note, stepped through the door, his face stern. "Mr. Graves, you'll come with me." The stationer waits Graves followed, his dignity a tattered cloak, leaving silence in his wake. Miss Marple remained by the hearth, her expression serene, though her eyes gleamed with quiet triumph. "Human nature weaves its own traps," she said softly. We need only trace the threads. The room exhaled, the fire's crackle softening the shock. Tea was abandoned, the guests dispersing into the night, their faces etched with awe and relief. The manor's shadows seemed to lift, though the scars of betrayal lingered. Miss Marple gathered her knitting, her work here nearly done, yet the village's pulse would thrum with this tale for years. Elderford's cosy facade had cracked, revealing a core of human frailty: greed, loyalty, vengeance. She, the unassuming sleuth, had peeled back its layers, each clue a note in a gripping melody that held listeners captive. The revelation, stark and inevitable, promised a resolution as rich as the starlight now bathing the village, a tale of truth triumphant, as compelling as a fireside story, whispered in the heart of winter's chill. Chapter 10. Tea and Tranquility. The 9th morning in Elderford unfolded with a tender luminescence, as if the village, weary of secrets, welcomed the sun's gentle caress. A delicate frost adorned the hedgerows, sparkling like scattered diamonds across the green, where children laughed over marbles, and the postman's whistle echoed with cheery resolve. The air carried the crisp bite of autumn, laced with the scent of baking bread from Mrs. Potts's tea room and the faint musk of fallen leaves. Yet beneath this serene tableau, Elderford thrummed with the aftershocks of revelation. Mr. Graves's confession, delivered in the manor's drawing room, had rippled through cottages and lanes, a tale to be recounted for generations. Miss Jane Marple, fortified by a pot of Darjeeling and a slice of her own gooseberry tart, sat in her parlour, her notebook now closed. Its clues: the banister's scuff, the thornless petal, the pantry dispute, the waxy fishing line, the cryptic note, the staircase sketch, Arthur's cufflink, the wax speck, the sedative bag, and the landing's gouge, woven into a tapestry of truth. Resolution, she murmured to Percival, who dozed contentedly by the hearth, is the stitch that binds the wound. Miss Marple had invited the manor's key figures to her cottage for tea, a ritual of closure to soothe the village's frayed nerves. Her parlour, a haven of chintz curtains and polished oak, glowed with the warmth of a crackling fire, its air fragrant with brewing tea, and the buttery allure of scones fresh from Mrs. Potts's oven. The table gleamed with her mother's bone china, each cup a relic of gentler days, their rims painted with forget-me-nots. Lady Margaret arrived first, her mourning black softened by a silk shawl, her face etched with relief beneath its sorrow. Arthur Langley followed, his city swagger subdued, a quiet resolve in his eyes. Reverend Hale, his prayer book tucked underarm, offered a tremulous smile, as if the weight of secrets had lifted. Elsie Turner, freed from her apron, slipped in shyly, her curls neat beneath a knitted cap. Tom Wilkins, broad and awkward in Sunday best, completed the circle, his gardener's hands clasped tightly, as if anchoring himself to this new calm. Constable Briggs, his helmet on his lap, joined them, his youthful earnestness tempered by awe. Miss Marple poured tea with steady hands, her lavender cardigan a beacon of calm, her voice as soothing as the steam rising from the pot. "My dear friends," she began, passing a plate of scones, "we've weathered a storm, but sunlight follows rain. Sir Reginald's death was no mere fall. A deliberate hand wove a web of deceit, but its strands are now unravelled. Let me share the pattern, so we may find peace." The room leaned in, cups forgotten, as her words cast a spell. The grand staircase was a stage for murder, not mischance. Chloral hydrate, slipped into Sir Reginald's sherry, dulled his wits, ensuring a fatal tumble. The scuff on the banister marked a braced foot, the gouge a pivoting heel. A thornless petal, snipped for a buttonhole, fell in haste. Talc, laced with sedative, betrayed a gloved hand. Wax from a candle lit the deed, and a labelled bag confessed its master. The fishing line and cufflink were decoys, meant to scatter blame to Tom, and Arthur Lady Margaret's shawl slipped, her voice soft. "Edmund, I never saw his pain. Reginald trusted him. How could it fester so?" Her eyes glistened, But her hands were steady, and Miss Marple noted the shift, grief yielding to acceptance. Arthur set down his cup, his voice low. "I thought you'd pinned me, Miss Marple. That cufflink had me sweating. Uncle's loans weighed heavy, but murder, never my game." His candour rang true, and Miss Marple smiled, recalling his nervous drumming, now stilled. Reverend Hale cleared his throat, his prayer book open. "That note, Graves knows too, haunted me. I feared it pointed to my own complaints about the fund. But you saw through the fog, Miss Marple." His relief was palpable, his fingers no longer clutching but resting lightly. Miss Marple's needles lay idle, her gaze warm. "Fog clears with patience, Reverend." "Elsie, your sharp ears caught Graves's quarrel, a clue to his buried grudge. Tom, your loyalty to Lady Margaret shone true, though whispers of affection cast shadows." The true hand was Graves's, forged in India's betrayal. A sapphire theft pinned on him, while Sir Reginald built this manor on its spoils. The note, the sedative, the wax, they were his confession. Elsie blushed, her voice a whisper. "I only spoke what I saw, Miss Marple. That shirt, the bitter smell, it scared me, but you made it clear." Her hands steadied, emboldened by truth. Tom nodded, his voice gruff. "I'd have taken the blame for her ladyship, but never touched Sir." "Your eyes, miss, they see what we miss." His gaze softened, gratitude in its depths. Constable Briggs shook his head, marvelling. "You're a wonder, Miss Marple. I'd have called it a slip without your nudging. How'd you spot the threads?" Miss Marple's spectacles glinted as she offered a scone. "Human nature, Constable, leaves footprints, greed, loyalty, revenge. I followed them, from India's dust to the staircase's shadows. Graves's silence was his prison, broken by a fatal push." Lady Margaret dabbed her eyes. "We owe you peace, Jane. The manor will heal. Arthur will see to it. What now for Elderford?" "Now," Miss Marple said, pouring another round. "We mend. Arthur, you'll steward the estate with care. Reverend, your roof will find its funds. Elsie, Tom, your honesty lights the way. The village will weave anew, as roses bloom after frost." The room exhaled, voices softening as tea flowed, the fires crackle a gentle underscore. Miss Marple watched, her heart warmed by resolution, though her mind already wandered to life's next puzzle. A village, she thought, is a garden of hearts, and I, its quiet keeper. As her guests departed, Elderford resumed its rhythm, the clink of milk bottles, the laughter of children, the distant bark of a dog. The manor stood silent, its staircase a witness no longer to tragedy, but to justice. Miss Marple tidied her parlour, Percival purring at her feet, and closed her notebook with a satisfied sigh. The mystery had unfolded, its knots untangled, each clue a note in a symphony of deduction that held listeners spellbound. Its resolution was as comforting as the tea steaming in her cup, a tale of truth triumphant, as inevitable as spring's return, and as captivating as a story whispered by the hearth, drawing every ear to its quiet, resolute close.